Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. Welcome to the latest Instant Banzuke going from May to July 2026. This one is sponsored by Monster Energy Drinks and my seething rage at having just discovered Microsoft replaced all of my program defaults with their own horse shit. Microsoft, quit fucking with my shit. As always, we start with the math. Alright, let's take a look at what we got. Starting as always at the top. Let's note first and foremost that we have currently 43 guys in the top division. We're gonna have to kick one of them out, but we'll figure out who that is later. Hoshoryu and Onosato. Onosato sat out of the whole tournament, so he was never going up from Yokozuna 1 West, so Hoshoryu with his 0 wins still maintains his hold on Yokozuna 1 East. Kirishima with his 12-3 moves up to the top Ozeki slot, and Kotozakura with his probably shouldn't have competed at all basho drops over to Ozeki 1 West. Atami Fuji and Kota Shoho with their 9-6 records hold rank at Sekiwake 1. Now, Wakataka Kage is going up from Komusubi into Sekiwake. He had more than 11 wins. He had 12 wins in the Yusho. They're definitely going to open up another slot for him. But Aonishiki, who was Kadoban, is coming down from Ozeki. So, how do we know which one is going to go ahead of the other? Well, history, and not even that far back of a history either. Back in May of 2024, Kirishima, this is when he was injured, he was 1-6-8, he was Kadoban, so he dropped from Ozeki, but at the same time, Onosato, he did the same thing that Wakataka Kage did. He had a 12-win Yusho and he went up. Very next basho, the Sekiwake were Abi, Onosato, and then Kirishima. The Kadoban Ozeki ended up at the end of the line. So in this case, we're going to have Wakataka Kage ahead of Ozeki. They're both going to be Sekiwake 2. Remember, if Aonishiki is healthy and can win 10 matches in July, he will go back to Ozeki for September. Wakataka Kage, on the other hand, having gotten to Komusubi with just 8 wins in March, it's really hard to say he's on any kind of an Ozeki run. He would just be starting one now. If he has a strong July, then we can talk about it for finishing it off in September. Now, as crazy as this basho was, the Komusubi actually line up pretty neatly because Yoshino Fuji and unbelievably Oho are the only 2 guys who actually earned spots at the Komusubi rank. The math put them up there. It didn't put anyone else up there where you have no decisions to make. Yoshino Fuji was higher ranked, had a better record, so even the order is easy to figure out. This one's pretty straightforward. But now we get to the Maegashira, and you know, the last few bashos we have had a lot of gaps, like just big empty spaces right in here that we need to fill. And this time that's not happening. So this should be easier. So where do we go from here? Well, Fujinokawa and Takanosho, despite their 7-8 records, are still ahead of everybody else. So at 7-8, they can hold rank. They will just go back to Maegashira 1 and basically be sad that they didn't take this advantage to get into the Sanyaku because, oh boy, this was their best opportunity to do it. Chura Umi should go up to 2 East and in July have dreams of this May basho. Hakuno Fuji and Gonoyama. Now this one is interesting, because further down the line, if 2 guys are tied, then usually the one with the more wins goes ahead. But if one guy was in the Joy and the other wasn't, then usually the one who was in the Joy, the top 16, gets preference. Gonoyama was number 17 on the Banzuke, but because of the way everything shook out, he was effectively right in the middle of the Joy because the top 16 who were actually in the tournament, he was right there. So I'm really not sure how they're going to make this work. And if you're a Guess the Banzuke player, this one matters because you're not going to get a free point here if you get it wrong. You are just, this is either all right or all wrong. Hakuno Fuji or Gonoyama, which one goes ahead? I'm actually going to go with Hakuno Fuji. Because I'm not sure which one is going to get preference, I'm going to say that Gonoyama, having absolutely collapsed at the end of this tournament, and having shown essentially no ability to compete in the Joy up to this point in his career, despite the fact that for pretty much all of March and the first half of this tournament, it looked like he could be competitive. He had just improved that much. Results say Hakuno Fuji is your better choice to go to a higher rank. So that's not a lot to go on. That is a very marginal argument for Hakuno Fuji getting pushed ahead of Gonoyama. If you go the other way, it makes perfect sense. We're just going to leave it there and move on. Those guys are 2 West and 3 East in some order. Hirata Umi should get bumped to 3 West, so he will drop a half a rank. And Daisho, 7 and 8 again at 4 East. That is going to be 4 consecutive tournaments come July at Maegashira 4 East. That is insane. That is not a thing, really. And yet the problem is nobody can take it from him. Nobody is actually getting ahead of him to where they can take that spot from him. Somebody's got to push him out of that slot, and nobody is doing it. So Daisho, he stays in spot again, 4 East. Ichi Yamamoto should drop 2 ranks on his 6 and 9 to 4 West. All these guys are lining up very nicely. Ura goes up +6 to Maegashira 5 East. Oshoma should go up to 5 West with his 8 and 7. Fuji Seiyun, he cannot go to 6 East because then he would be getting promoted with his 7 and 8. That's not going to happen. So he'll just stay at 6 West. Kotoeho should therefore jump ahead of him to 6 East. There's no reason why Shodai should just get what would be a half rank decrease with his trash ass 6 and 9 record. So Shodai, he can drop just to 7 East, go down a rank and a half with his 6 and 9. That's absolutely fine. And now once we've moved those guys, we've created a little bit of a gap that we need to fill. So Wakamoto Haru actually falls a little bit into that Gonoyama category. 5 East was not in the Joy, except in this tournament it ended up being in the Joy. But then again, the Joy is kind of defined by fighting the Sanyaku members, and with so many Sanyaku members gone, are they really thinking about that? I don't know. The question here really is, does Takayasu get pushed ahead of... So Takayasu is definitely going to end up ahead of Asanoyama, 100%, because Asanoyama can only go up to 10 East. That's as high as he's going to go, and he's just going to stay there. So does Takayasu get pushed ahead of Wakamoto Haru from a rank and a half behind? Well, he's going down 7 ranks with his 2 wins, which is actually a pretty good drop. And by doing that, Wakamoto Haru goes down to 8 East with his 5 and 10. That's a 3 rank drop. That makes sense. I think that is pretty logical. So you could have Takayasu and Wakamoto Haru in that order. I think that also makes sense. But realistically, Takayasu, then Wakamoto Haru, that's what I think is going to happen. So we'll move on. Roga is going to get a nice big jump of 6 ranks on his 9 and 6. So we can see, once again, if he can actually do anything at a single-digit rank. Magic 8 Ball says, I don't know about that, son. And I didn't even notice this as I was doing the math. We have a 4-way tie over here at 12 East. And because we've got all these gaps up here, they're all going to go up. It's just a question of how much and to what degree. Oh, well, I should note, Takeru Fuji is coming up from Juryo, so he's going to be treated differently. So we're going to set him aside. We have a 3-way tie. So if we go on the logic that because they're all lower ranked, nobody was in the Joy. Chiyoshoma, okay, you could make the case that Chiyoshoma was even in the Joy because even he got yeeted up to fight Atami Fuji because so many guys were missing, but I don't think that's going to hold. Let's treat Chiyoshoma as on the level with Tobi and Fujiryoga. If we put them in win order, that gives us Fujiryoga 10 and 5 of +8. That's a lot, but I mean, that's gonna happen no matter where we put him. Tobizaru up 5.5 with his 9 and 6, and then Chiyoshoma down 3.5 with his 5 and 10. How do we feel about that? Well, if we put them, so Chiyoshoma should not end up in between these two guys. There's no reason for that. The alternative would be Chiyoshoma just goes in front of both of them. So there he goes down 2 on his 5 and 10, but then Fujiryoga, he still goes up 7.5 with his 10 wins, and Tobizaru 4.5 with his 9. And that's pretty good. Do they want to push Chiyoshoma down further? This is honestly a great question. This is a very odd type of situation. Usually when you've got guys of dramatically different rank coming together like that, one of them, it was in the Joy, so he gets that, theoretically special treatment. That's not really the case here. So I kind of think we're going to end up with, I think I'm going to put Fuji in front. Now, well, let me make the argument for putting Chiyoshoma in the middle, which is, once again, as I have said on many occasions in the past, they can't decide whether to put him in front or behind, so they put him in the middle as a compromise. Could that happen? Yeah, but I'm not going to go with that. I'm going to put Chiyoshoma at 10 West. That's still an under demotion. That's still pretty good for the kind of performance he had. I'll give this some thought for the official Guess the Banzuke entry, but for the moment, I like this. For the moment, I think this is okay. Takeru Fuji does not go up yet because he's coming from Juryo. He's going to get bumped back a little. We'll deal with that in a second. So that means Wakano Sho and Mitake Yumi are next. Well, they're tied, and Wakano Sho had more wins, so Wakano Sho should go in front. That's been pretty consistent, so we're going to do that. Asahi Koryu, if he goes there at 12 West, so he goes down 4 ranks, that should be fine. I suppose they could make some kind... Oh, no, wait a second. We got to get Takeru Fuji out of the way. God, I almost forgot. So he'll go to 12 East, go down 3.5 ranks. I think that's fine. Because Mitake Yumi was only 8 and 7, I guess they could do some arbitrary nonsense and swap these two around. That's not impossible. So let it be said that I made note of that if this ends up being what's happening. But I mean, that's one of those things that it's not a coin flip. I don't think that's a coin flip. I think you got to plan on Mitake Yumi going ahead. And if he ends up behind, well, then that's just JSA things, right? Now, the bottom of the division, we've got a bunch of guys coming up from Juryo and a bunch of losing records in Makuuchi. What do we do with this? Well, we could put Takeru Fuji up here, right? But the last time that anyone from Juryo with any record from any rank ended up at Maegashira 12 or higher was 2022. They've stopped doing that. 13 seems to be the limit. The reason they would make an exception for that is if they don't think any of the Maegashira guys actually deserve to be that high, and only the Juryo guys make sense. But does that argument hold here? Well, who's the top Maegashira guy left? Abi. He was 5 and 10 at 9 East. If he goes to 12 West, that's a 3.5 rank drop. That's very normal. It's not like they're going to say, man, that's barely a demotion at all. It's a perfectly reasonable demotion, especially with Asahi Koryu at 5 and 10 going down the same amount right next to him. So that should be fine. Then we've got Nishiki Fuji, who is also 5 and 10 and just can keep the line going. So let's put him at 13 East. That is pretty logical. And Kinbozan was tied with him, so putting him at 13 West, he goes down 2 with his 6 and 9. I think that's absolutely fine. Now, Takeru Fuji was mathematically at 12. Again, that doesn't matter that much, but it means he was, by the numbers, pretty far ahead of Shishi and Asahi Koryu. So let's put Takeru Fuji at 14 East and Kazuma at 14 West. That's okay. At Takeru Fuji at 14 East is pretty reasonable. He was at the top of Juryo. He did really well. Kazuma, on the other hand, is coming up from Juryo 6, and they're probably going to pull him back a little. So he's ahead of Onokatsu, we know that. Let's put Shishi ahead of Kazuma. So that's 2.5 ranks down on 6 and 9. Reasonable, very reasonable. We pull Kazuma back, and then Daiseisan, Onokatsu, Asasuryu. Where does Asahi Koryu go? So he had 3 wins at 7 West. Are they going to limit his drop? I think they might, because again, Kazuma is ahead of all the other guys by rights coming up from Juryo, but he also came up from the middle of Juryo, which I think means they're going to not let him go up that far. So let's put Asahi Koryu at 15 East and Kazuma at 15 West. I kind of think they're both going to be at 15, but they could be in either order. And from there, it's just in which order do the other guys go? Onokatsu was ahead of Daiseisan. They had the same record, and Onokatsu was ahead of him at Juryo 1. So we've got Onokatsu at 16 East, Daiseisan at 16 West. Could they be pushed up further in order to bump Asahi Koryu back? Maybe. Could they be pushed up further ahead of Kazuma? Cause okay, we're gonna do some math. Theme song. 12 and 3 is plus 9, right? 9 and 6 is plus 3. But let's compare Kazuma to Onokatsu. Kazuma was 5 ranks behind, so he is mathematically plus 1 ahead of Onokatsu. However, the fact that Onokatsu was at the top of Juryo and Kazuma was way far down, this is not a situation that comes up a lot. Normally, I think they would be perfectly fine letting Kazuma be ahead, but in doing so, if this is their setup, then Onokatsu only ends up going up almost no distance at all, the very minimum he could go with a 9 and 6 record. Can they? Sure. Will they? Question mark. So here are the possibilities as I see them. This is my instinctive setup. By the way, Asasuiryu, bless your heart, you got that last win on the final day. You're going to be at Juryo 1 East, but we'll talk about you in a minute. Asakoryu, 15 East, okay. Kazuma, 15 West, Onokatsu, 16 East, Daiseisan, 16 West. Alternative, Asakoryu actually gets dropped all the way to the bottom, and then these three guys go ahead of him because that gives them more of a reasonable promotion given how they performed. Another alternative, because Onokatsu and Daiseisan were at the top of Juryo, and because Kazuma coming up from Juryo 6, yeah, 6 ranks up on a 12-3 record is an under promotion, but it's still a pretty big promotion. They could put him behind those guys and ahead of Asakoryu, or they could put Asakoryu ahead of Kazuma and only Kazuma. This is not impossible. This is a thing they might do. And of course, that leads to yet another possibility, which is Asakoryu is in fact ahead of all three, but Onokatsu and Daiseisan are ahead of Kazuma. So this could play out a bunch of different ways and they'd all be pretty reasonable. As it stands, I think I'm gonna leave them like that. See, I'm trying to scroll down to Juryo and I'm like, I just want to leave that B for now. I'm gonna go back, oh man. No, you know what? I think this actually makes a lot of sense for the moment. Well, they all make a lot of sense. I'm gonna stop talking about it. I'm gonna stick with Asakoryu at 15 East, Onokatsu at 15 West, Daiseisan at 16 East, and Kazuma at 16 West. But shuffle those guys up in any order you want, and pretty much as long as Onokatsu and Daiseisan end up next to each other, whatever you come up with is going to be pretty logical. Okay, let's talk about Juryo now. And Juryo is the opposite problem of Makuuchi. There's only 25 out of 28 guys here. We're going to have to bring some guys back up. So who are those going to be? Well, we'll get to them in a second. Like I said, Asasuiryu, he earned a spot by the numbers in Makuuchi, but there just wasn't a space for him. So he's going to end up at Juryo 1 East. Kyokukayu, who just keeps doing work, he goes to 1 West. Is he going to make Makuuchi? You know, he's had 2 really good tournaments, and yet I still feel like I'd be kind of surprised if he got there, but we'll see. We'll see. He's been better than expected for me twice in a row. Why not a third? Toki Hayate should very easily end up at 12 West. At 2 East, he was 12 West, which bumps Sada no Umi over to Juryo 2 West with a half rank decrease. Tomokaze and Dewa Noryu, they were tied. Let's put Tomokaze in front. Dewa Noryu gets a half rank drop to 3 West. Katanawaka, Toshino Fuji. We'll leave Katanawaka at 4 West with his 1 rank increase, and Toshino Fuji gets a little bit of a bump to 4 East. Shonen no Umi and Ryuden. Well, Ryuden is coming down from Makuuchi, so we're just going to slide Shonen no Umi over. Ryuden could get bumped up like ahead of Toshi and Katanawaka and then under promote Katanawaka. That is quite possible, honestly, but you know what, we're just going to run with the numbers this time. Ryuden goes to 5 East. Oshoumi and Kazukano. So Oshoumi is we're going to leave him at 6 East for the same reason as Ryuden. We're not going to go and under promote guys further if we don't have to, just to move him up, even though that's very possibly what's going to happen. Meisei and Midori Fuji. Midori Fuji will slide him over. Meisei just holds to his 1 rank drop on 7 and 8. Tamawashi, we're not going to do what we just did. We're going to slide Midori Fuji back. We're going to move Tamawashi up to 7 East. Then we're going to move, are they going to over-demote Meisei? They have been very willing to over-demote guys and just make weird moves where they need to. Yeah, I think they might make Meisei go to 8 East. When I first started doing these, just playing with Banzukes in general, the idea of them making the 7 and 8 guy go down an extra half rank would have been unthinkable. They would have made the guy with the winning record go down. But I mean, things have changed so much that I'm sort of automatically making Meisei go back, and it just seems correct. Hatsuyama, the unfortunate 5 and 10 at 3 West, he'll drop to 8 West with his exact demotion in place. Shirokuma and Nishinoryu are each saved a half rank but still go down on their 7 and 8s. Hitoshi jumps up 2 ranks, as does Tamashoho with their 8 and 7s. Kagayaki gets saved a bit, only going down 4 on his 5 and 10. Tohakuryu should only go down 1.5 with his 6 and 9. He'll be at 11 West. Enho slides over to 12 East. Again, Arashi Fuji is coming up from the division below, so we're going to ignore him for the moment. And then Kaio up to 12 West, 3 ranks down at his 5 and 10. These movements have been shockingly easy to do so far. But now we get to the real question mark. Who do we bring back up? Remember, there's only 25 guys in the division right now. We have to bring 3 up. Who are they going to be? Well, Tochi Taikai is an obvious choice. He can just stay at 14 East with his 7 and 8 record. That's totally fine. And then So usually, not always, but usually, if a guy does not get into Juryo by the numbers, and at the top of Makushita, it is just the regular numbers, even though they only have 7 matches, they don't get in if there's any reasonable way to avoid it. Now, that's not 100%. As I recall, there's a recent instance where they actually very specifically did not do that, but I can't remember who was involved. It was pretty recent, though. So Tanji could absolutely go up, but we've got Nishikigi and Hakuyozan who are tied and ahead of everybody else who could potentially get slid up into Juryo. And I don't know. So Hakuyozan should get saved. He had more wins than Nishikigi. That's probably what's going to happen. He probably is able to stay in Juryo. So we'll put him at 14 West. But Tanji or Nishikigi, actually, wait a minute. Are they going to do that? Because if they put Nishikigi, so Hakuyozan is not going to stay at 13 West. That would be no demotion on 6 and 9. That's not going to happen. I know they've done it in the past. There were special circumstances. It's not going to happen. But if they do Nishikigi instead, then he goes down 2 ranks on 5 and 10, which at least is something. And then if they want to bring up the Makushita guy, they can just put him at 14 West, and that's totally fine. Or they could put Nishikigi over here. That's a very tiny demotion, but it's still a demotion. That feels all kinds of wrong, though. And a big thing that I've sort of learned tangentially, I haven't paid super close attention to Makushita's stuff, but for guys who are outside of the top 5, they generally have to go 7 and 0 to get promoted. Not always, but usually. In fact, not that guys at Makushita 6 exactly with exactly 6 and 1 records happen all the time, but Ishiura in 2015 was the last guy to be promoted in the same position that Tanji's in right now. So I think we're going to actually see Hakuyozan and Nishikigi both get saved. Now, I guess it depends which order they want to put him in, but Arashi Fuji is probably, so they usually put the Makushita guys coming up as far back as they can. But Nishikigi and Hakuyozan are getting such minimal demotions that they're probably going to put Arashi Fuji at 13 West. So I've got Nishikigi at 13, Juryo 13 East, Arashi Fuji at 13 West, coming up from Makushita, Tochi Taikai staying in place with his 7 and 8 at 14 East, and then Hakuyozan just dropping 1 rank at from 13 West to 14 West with his 6 and 9. Tanji moves up to Makushita 1 East with a chance to get into Juryo next time. A bunch of other guys move up, and the rest of that is for another time, another place, and another person to do. And that is the Instant Banzuke going out of May 2026 and into July. If you would like to use this fantastic little Banzuke helper made by Chio Tasuke, the link for that will be in the description. Time to chug another monster and get working on the tier list recap. Look for that as soon as I can get it out. Other than that, have a great day, and I will see you soon.